Welcome back to My Trauma's Chronic, but I'm iconic. In today's episode, we have the incredible Jason Selormey, the specialist engagement practitioner who's making waves at Weston College and beyond. Jason is not just an average practitioner. They're a true champion for students who face the challenges of ADHD and behavioral difficulties at Weston College. Their expertise in this area allows them to provide tailored support and guidance to help these students thrive. But that's not all. Jason's dedication to creating a more inclusive and equitable environment extends to their involvement with the global majority group, Weston College anti-racism powerhouse. As a member of this group, Jason actively contributes to fostering a culture of understanding, respect, and equality for all students, regardless of their backgrounds and needs. And the passion doesn't stop there. Jason also shares his knowledge and expertise as a teacher on the social justice unit at the local university, with a focus on anti-racism and masculinity. They're empowering future generations to challenge societal norms and promote positive change through their multifaceted roles and unwavering commitment. Jason is making a profound impact on the lives of students and the broader community. So get ready to be inspired by their remarkable work and dedication to creating a more inclusive and just society. And today, we're going to dive into a topic that's near and dear to many, transitioning from childhood childhood ADHD to adult ADHD. It's a journey filled with unique challenges and experiences that deserves our attention and understanding. So get ready to explore the intricacies of this transition and discover why it's crucial to recognize and support individuals navigating this path. So let's jump right in and welcome Jason. So what initially drew you into the field of engagement practice?
You know, it was actually luck. It was actually really luck, to be honest with you. So I started off at the mental health team at Weston College where I work, and I was getting on pretty well over there. But my manager, my current manager now, realised that there was a bit of a gap at college with not having anyone that sort of supported learners with ADHD. So I was in my probation meeting for the mental health team with my manager and my manager now, so my line manager, so two managers, and she offered me the job in the probation meeting for my other job, which obviously is quite like a huge show of confidence towards me. So then I sort of, I accepted it because I thought it'd be a nice, exciting role. And I think the reason it sort of resonated with me is because as I was sort of researching ADHD more and more, I realized that these sort of symptoms are quite similar to things I've experienced in my life. So yeah, that's sort of it. Really, just a bit of luck, really, and just some ingenuity.
It's amazing. It's one thing like your job seems to have,
Mm.
which many places don't have, especially when they work with vulnerable people, is like self-reflection, and it's great that they're able to identify a gap and find someone who's be able to fit that role.
Hmm.
And can you tell us about a project that you worked on that you believe that you had a significant impact?
Oh wow, so many. I guess probably the biggest one right now is so I'm currently working with Nason on sort of an ethnicity and send project. And I wanted to sort of look at why it was that particular groups were kind of overrepresented or underrepresented in particular send characteristics, like for example, social, emotional, mental health, or moderate learning difficulties, things that are quite subjective. So, I started looking at that, presented it at Nason as well, which is pretty cool. And I sort of started to find that I think that there are certain groups that were beholden to some narratives around sort of send and around like some sort of narratives around how they interact with send. And I think that like sort of influenced the numbers a little bit. I'd looked in some other research, and that was sort of the one thing that wasn't really spoken about is people talk about socioeconomic circumstances and things like that, which is pretty prevalent. But I think that some people or some sort of institutions are kind of institutionally racist, if I'm being honest with you, and having issues in sort of how they sort of get certain groups to access sense. So that probably was and is currently right now the biggest project I've worked on.
Yeah, I've had quite a few personal experiences where there is, whether it's from hospital services or
Hmm.
education, or there's a wide range of support that is often, senior management is often, Caucasian white,
Yeah,
and they often have, biases and prejudice already. And I'm
yeah,
like, if you have biases and prejudice and you're unable to identify that within yourself, that's a massive problem. And you
yeah.
probably shouldn't be in that job.
And that's the thing. That's the thing. It's recognizing it, right? Recognizing it in yourself. It's like, so I did some training yesterday. Actually, funny enough, as a staff training about the project and stuff. And you have sort of like three categories of people after trainings. You have the people that sort of like kind of get it a little bit and they might nod along, and then you have some people that are sort of indifferent and don't really care. And they're like usually the hardest people. But then you have some people in the middle that are just like, I understand what you're saying. I just don't think it relates to me. And it's like, or they might like try to like absolve themselves of like their views. So they might say like, oh well, I tried this in the past and that in the past, and it just doesn't seem to work, to be honest with you. So I just gave up. And it's like when you don't really recognize your biases in these narratives, based on these narratives, I don't think anything's going to change really. But I think yeah, it's about having a growth mindset, and I don't think people are really willing to have that necessarily.
Yeah. It's like I'm like, do you want me to hand you your P45? Like, what would you like? Because like this is not for my professional. I guess it was professional because it affected the relationships that I could build.
Yeah.
But the one personal like biases that I had because of my trauma, like the people that sexually abused me, my mother's two brothers, they're very dark skinned.
Hmm.
So before any men who were dark skinned, I would refuse to work with them. I would get distressed when seeing them. But I worked with so many amazing people, who are dark skinned men, they're tall as well, like my mother's brothers, but they're absolutely different. And to be able to challenge that, whether it's in your personal life, your professional life, or both, it is important. And because of your, I feel like one part is that's really important when you work with people is you have to challenge yourself and other people. And
Definitely.
if you're unable to do that, it's a problem.
Yeah, definitely. I see that. I see it every single day. I'm having conversations with teachers and members of staff who have a lot of biases around maybe different ethnicities or even different disabilities. Because I work with ADHD, I have a lot of. I've met some people who think it's not real, for example, or I've met some people who dismiss the symptoms of some of my learners and stuff, and it's it is difficult to have those conversations with people, especially when you can relate to people you work with that have those symptoms, and sort of even like remaining like level headed and cool headed about these sort of things can be quite difficult because you're quite passionate about them. But yeah, I definitely see it all the time. People just unwilling to engage.
Mm. And often with ADHD, people are often put down as, they're lazy,
Yeah,
they're disruptive.
yeah,
I'm like, but the thing is, like, people with ADHD, which people often realize, they can be one of the most intelligent people in the room. But
definitely.
because you're unable to stimulate their brain in a way that stimulates their brain, not yours, their
Hmm.
brain, they don't know what to do with that energy, that passion, and it could come off as being disruptive, like being the class clown.
Hmm.
But I feel like people aren't, like, for example, if somebody's likes to walk around the classroom a lot, you might assign them a job to do where like they hand out the books or something like that.
Yeah.
So they get that movement in. And they feel also good about themselves because it's not like, okay, you're disrupted. And I feel like these small changes people find can't, unable to see to them because they're unable to open their mind up.
Yeah, and I think as well they're taught a certain way about how to teach. and they learn a certain way about how to teach based on their experiences at school, or
Mm.
experiences of authority figures. So, one thing that I always ask staff to do is just reflect with themselves about their own traumas and their own past and what that means of how they teach learners. Because, you know, if you had a horrible teacher, for example, at school who, said that you have to sit still, that will be instilled in you as a teacher, or as someone who's in that profession. And it's important to have that self-reflection and realize, actually, you know what, that person was, taught a certain way that isn't really beneficial and doesn't really work anymore. But again, it's hard because I'm asking people to 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 address things that they probably have never addressed realistically, to address responses to certain behaviors that they probably never addressed or have come from certain things. I've had it where I've had some learners tell me that staff have told them to F off, for example, or, been quite rude and quite horrible to them. And I say to my learners, it maybe seem frustrating and you're right to feel frustrated, but you also have to understand that they're coming from a place where that's what they've been told to do. That's what the information they have at hand is, so let me deal with that, and then you try and engage. But yes, it can be quite difficult.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry, during our conversation, I was like, I don't think I've taken my ADHD medication. So, I, um, how do you um how do you approach creating inclusive and supportive environments in your work?
So for me personally, like I'm a big fan of like psychological safety. It's something that I really endeavor to sort of transmit to people that I work with. So like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like sharing, deep traumas of everyone, but I'm a big fan of, just telling people how I'm feeling when I'm feeling it, because the way psychological safety works, like, you usually feel safe with people that tell the truth or tell their truth, I was reading something on Twitter the other day by quite a cool doctor. Her name is Dr. Nicola Pera, and she was saying one of the most powerful things you can do in life in general is just tell the truth. Because when you tell the truth, there's nothing else that people can say to you, or that you can hide from anyone else, and it creates that sort of environment of psychological safety. So that's big for me, and it's also just being my authentic self as well. And that I find usually allows people to feel included because they can be in an environment where they know, actually, what, I can be myself and not have any sort of pushback or any sort of comeback with what I'm presenting. So yeah, those two things are probably the most important for me when I talk about creating an inclusive environment at work.
What are some of the biggest challenges you face within your role?
That's a good question. So like I said before, some of the biggest challenges of so somebody such as myself, and you may see this as well, who has ADHD, is talking to people who dismiss it, which is something that
Mm.
happens, a lot realistically, especially in education. That is a big challenge because you're almost dismissing my reality and the reality of people that I work with, and yet the reality of other staff members as well. So it's about sort of keeping a level head and explaining it the best way possible. When I do, so I also do anti-racism training in my job as well. And when I do that, I realize that talking about neurodiversity, because like it's, you know erasure, like anyone can be neurodiverse. There isn't really like things that people can deny. But when you talk about anti-racism, and I'm talking about things that, like, are against what your parents taught you, or what your spouse believes, or what you're telling your kids, it can become quite personal. And I find that people can dismiss that, or I find that I get crazy questions. Like I had a question not too long ago, in which a staff member asked me, what's the point of us learning about anti-racism? I treat everyone the same anyway. And it's just getting them to understand, actually, there are specific groups that have been through specific traumas that need specific attention, and that makes more sense. So yeah, those things can be quite challenging, and then of course just sort of standard interpersonal, conflicts at work, work politics. Some people like each other, some people don't like each other. There's relationships to manage as well. There's team dynamics to manage as well, within sort of different teams. So all of those things make a nice, cool mess, and they keep me quite busy.
It sounds like a highly rewarding job as well as challenging.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I get to work with, some really great kids, and I always tell people that I learn more from them than they can ever learn from me. They teach me so much about the world. They teach me so much about ADHD and trauma and whatever it is they're going through. And I pick things up and I go, actually, maybe if I try this, that might work, or maybe if I look into this, that might work. I was even just looking into chronic fatigue syndrome and ADHD, and why they're interlinked, because I have three learners who are completely different from each other, who've had chronic fatigue syndrome in the past and have ADHD. So I just learned so much from them. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, I it's really strange because a lot of people don't like speak about how people with ADHD are more likely to burn out much quicker. No matter how much sleep, how much rest they get, they can get tired so easily as well.
Definitely. And there's always that like sort of feeling. I don't know if you feel it, but I definitely feel it. I just never feel like I can stop. I'm always just thinking about something. And my girlfriend recently just told me, she's like, you need to actually take a day off on a Saturday or a Sunday, and you just need to not do anything, because I'm always reading or researching or looking at something, or I'm always like thinking about something. I write something down and I might journal something, and I'm constantly going. And partly because I don't know if you can relate to this, but sometimes people with ADHD, we always feel like we have to do more, or like there's always something more we can do. There's always like this sense of like perfectionism, or like being a bit of a workaholic, because if we sit down and rest, maybe it forces us to not engage the things that we love, which is quite difficult, in the first place. So yeah, it's just I'm always doing something.
Yeah, it's true. It's like I have that. It's like I have like it's like I already have three, four jobs already, like with different organizations as well as my children's chronic, my iconic. But I still apply for jobs because I feel like, okay, I still have brain capacity, I still have time,
Yeah.
even if I could spend, even though I spent like on average a day, on an average day I might spend 16 hours on just my children's chronic, but my chronic work, but I can also fit five, seven, eight different things in. But I know like I can do things which other people cannot do as well, which is, that I don't know if you can relate, but the hyper focus,
Yeah.
the
So
hyper focus, we
amazing.
can be really, really quick with things. I know that I can I can complete level three courses within a few hours,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I can do like 30, 40 CPD courses in 30 minutes, which other people cannot do. And then I have my time to do something else.
Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah.
And it's like if my brain is not engaged, I really suffer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's really like frustrating because I crave my autism craves that structure and routine,
Right.
but my ADHD is like, oh, let's do this, let's do that, let's do, and it's just it like it doesn't, yeah, like autism ADHD overlaps, but they
Yeah,
also like lock corners quite often.
definitely.
Um, so what strategies do you use to effectively engage with the population of the ADHD population in your college?
So how it usually works, how they sort of find me is basically they are referred to me via a tutor, for example, or via the Senko. Because my college has three different campuses, so the Senko at each campus will sort of contact me about a specific learner, and then I'll sort of reach out to them and ask if they want support, and then we go from there. So I mean, so the main strategy I think that a lot of people with ADHD struggle with is actually low self-esteem. That's one thing that I really endeavor to work on my learners with, because for a variety of different reasons, with ADHD, and how you engage with education, usually you are told that you can't do a lot realistically. You're told that things aren't going to go your way, or you're told that this isn't going to work, or you're told to sit down or shut up, or all that sort of stuff. And it's helping them understand. how to accept themselves is the first thing that I usually do. We also look at sort of emotional regulation. And it's funny I mentioned emotional regulation because so obviously at the time of recording, we were meant to record like an hour before, and obviously something that happened with you, and I immediately like just lost empathy. Like, and it's something that happens with ADHD. You just sometimes your emotions get the better of you, and I was really upset, and I felt like really rejected all of a sudden, and I felt really sad and upset, and really, and I thought to myself like, oh my God, like was this like a scam? I really wanted to talk about something I'm really interested in. I've never spoken to it about, in this professional manner, like outside of college. So I felt like really horrible about myself, And then when I saw your message, I was like, oh, okay, never mind then. So
I'm
all of
so
those sort of
sorry.
thought. No, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's not. It's literally not your fault. It's literally not your fault. I'm doing something that I tell my learners not to do, which is which is like use your wise mind, use the wise part of your brain. And realistically, I should have said or thought, oh, maybe something's come up on her end, or maybe she's got to do this, or maybe she's got to do that. Life happens. But immediately I went into myself and based my interaction that hadn't even happened on things that happened in the past, like being rejected or like being left or not feeling valued, for example. So I tell them, or I try to teach them sort of how to manage and regulate their emotions as well and build that sense of empathy, because also what happens is how they sort of interact with tutors or other staff members is when staff members react poorly to them, they go sometimes can fly off the handle and they might say something that they might later regret. And it's helping them and staff members understand that they're coming from different places. So I might say, have you ever considered that staff members have specific like KPIs to meet or specific goals to meet or percentages to meet to sort of help them progress in their job? And then they go, oh, I never really thought of that. And I thought, have you ever considered they might have things going on in their lives outside of college, kids, relationships, all that sort of stuff that affect how they are in college? And they go, oh, actually, you know what? No, I never considered that. And then with staff members, it's the exact same conversation I'm having with them. You know, I talk about not doing any harm to staff members. So not being that teacher that people remember from school that was horrible. Because that has a traumatic effect on people. And helping staff consider, have you ever considered they have other things going on in their lives? They have relationships, they have parents, some of them have full-time jobs, some of them have kids, for example, their own children at young ages as well to deal with. So yeah, emotional regulation and self-esteem are sort of the two main things I sort of base my strategies around.
I, I feel like it gets really distressing because I can relate to that. Is if
Definitely.
somebody says you're meeting me at 1 o'clock, I
Yeah.
expect you to be here at 1 o'clock, I will get distressed. I'll get real. Like if we're meeting in person, I'll be like, okay, where are you? Where are you? I might like start playing with my hair to the point, and then start like twirling and then start pulling it out. I will
Hmm.
be waiting at the door at the steps, and I'll be like, "Hey, this person's not coming. This person hates me. This
Right.
person doesn't like me.
Right.
What, like they don't care about me. They don't give a
Yeah.
fuck." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"You're like you don't." Yeah. And then like after a few minutes, you're like, "Okay, you don't give a fuck about me. I don't give a fuck about you." You
Right.
end up coming. I'm not going to engage with you. I'm not going to engage with. Do I end up engaging? Yeah, I do end up engaging, but I'm like,
Right.
and it's really hard. I feel like with autism and with ADHD, it's very hard to see other people's perspectives, which
Super
I
hard.
still struggle with today.
Mm.
I'd be like, and then some we can be really empathetic people,
Hmm.
but at the same
Definitely.
time we can be extremely not empathetic.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I could be like, okay, whatever. Like somebody does something like that they have to reschedule it very seriously. I'd be like, okay, they're dead in my mind. This person doesn't like
Yeah,
this person doesn't exist anymore.
yeah,
I don't know who they are, and
yeah.
I'll never engage with them again.
Hmm.
Like sort of mindset. And it's really, really hard to navigate because both autism and ADHD have like rejection dysphoria as well.
Absolutely,
Like
yeah.
it gets symptoms which we struggle with because a
Mm.
lot of people, whether it's from ACEs to ADHD, autism, whatever it may be, has that massive foundation of rejection.
Absolutely. And it's something that we have to navigate like all the time, And I always I don't know about this in your relationships, but in my relationships, friendships or romantic relationships, I always end up saying, sorry, because I didn't I hate to sort of make people feel like, I've hurt them, because I know what that feels like, or I navigate that every single day. It's like you're saying, once you have like that plan in your head of what you're gonna do, if someone says they're gonna meet you at like, 12 o'clock, for example, and it's like 12:04, I mean, with my learners, I don't really care. I tell them, if this is your slot, it's fine. But in other relationships, when it's like more of a personal relationship, it's like, oh, it's 12:04, they're not coming, they don't like me, I've done something wrong, or
Wait, you can wait 4 minutes?
exactly, yeah, or like I've said something in the past, they might consider like and you're just going round and round and round, and then they might just say, "Oh, my bus was late." I was like, "Oh, I didn't even think about that, to be honest. Buses could be
Yeah.
late."
Like with the like, you know what? Like with my professionals that work with me,
Mm,
like I have my social worker. Oh, I hate her. Sorry. Um, my other social worker was lovely. It
yeah.
was lovely. But like my adult social worker, nightmare.
Mm,
My PA, my two PAs, all my staff that work with me on a regular basis. I'm on a 3-to-1. I'm in supported accommodation. But like with them, I have a much shorter fuse. I'm like,
right.
okay, you said you would come here, you didn't come. This is distressing me. And I'm like, and I feel like the one thing is communication.
Mm,
And like, and then there's this person called Danny. Absolute. He works with me. He's like my father as well. We
mm-hmm,
don't work together anymore, but we still have a relationship. He's like my father. Um, and he's like he um he has ADHD as well. Oh my God. This man is the definition of late. I feel like late. I feel like late. He's past late, and I'm like, his mind is so busy, but his mind is so fucking beautiful as well. The
mm,
way that he cares about people, the way that he works with people. He's a consultant as well. He
mm,
does so many like amazing things.
mm.
But that's the only person that can be an hour late, and I'll be like, okay. But he says this thing when I because I used to live in his residential. I was his first young person in his residential children's home.
Mm,
Um, and like when I could become like emotionally distressed to the point where I'm like showing I'm self-harming, trying to kill myself, or when I'm become physically aggressive. Afterwards, I will feel really, really bad because I have like different parts of me.
mm,
Coco, she's really, really aggressive.
mm,
But I'm not like I don't like that part of myself.
mm,
Coco, and he's like, life just happens.
mm.
Life happens. And now I've started saying that to everybody. Like, life happens. It's okay that you're late. Life happens.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's really hard because in that moment when I was with him, I was like, shut the fuck up. This is so annoying.
Yeah.
Like, when you're genuinely sorry and you're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean
Right.
to bite you. I didn't mean
Right.
to strangle you. I didn't mean
Yeah.
to do. You're really, really sorry. And this person means so much. And they go, it's okay. Life happens. And I'm like,
Are you
I will
serious?
strangle you again and send you. Like, what is going on? But it's like things happen.
Hmm.
Like, okay, I say that in my professional life, in my personal life, very, that's barely
Yes,
exists.
it's very difficult.
Um, um, So, you work with it's a college, so it's like a sixth
Yeah.
form. Yeah.
Yes, like a sixth
So
form, yeah.
there's people from 16 to 18, right?
16 to 19.
16 to 19. So then there's
Mm,
like, child ADHD as well as adult ADHD.
yeah.
So what for those who don't know,
Hmm.
duh, duh, what are the common symptoms in of ADHD in children and how
Hmm.
are they different from typical childhood behavior?
Mm. So it's interesting. So with like younger people with ADHD, usually if a child is diagnosed with ADHD, it's usually on the hyperactive or impulsive side of scale. So you get the fidgety types, or they might talk back. For example, we might get people in lessons talking back or being sort of quite impulsive, class clown type of behavior. But as they sort of physically mature, usually it's more combined ADHD, so it can be a bit of inattentive and a bit of hyperactive, impulsive. And it's interesting as well. That's a pretty good question you asked because the majority of my learners, thinking about it now, are 16 to 17 years old. I actually don't think I have one adult learner, and she's 20. I think I want to say 25, and she still struggles with a lot of inattention, for example, and slightly a bit of impulsivity, but it's mostly inattention. Is her sort of style of ADHD. She has obviously built up a lot of different strategies to manage her ADHD as she gets older, which is usually what happens with people that have ADHD. As they get older, they do have strategies they know that works for them, or strategies they think work for them for the most part. But yeah, so in children ADHD, so it's presents quite juvenile, maybe as you can have troubles at home, punching walls or putting hands through walls, for example, if you're hyperactive, or like if you're attentive, just daydreaming or losing track of thought, constantly losing things as well, like notebooks, pens, keys, phones, all that sort of stuff. And as you get older, it becomes less severe but more combined type of ADHD.
Can you explain the process of diagnosing ADHD in children and the criteria used for assessment?
Yeah, sure. Um, So with sort of diagnosis of ADHD by children, usually I don't know if this is still the case now, but usually you can go through the school. So for example, school can make references to sort of healthcare units or sort of healthcare professionals. You go with your parents, and then what will happen is they'll do like an observational meeting, for example, with the parent, discussing symptoms, discussing things that are commonly seen. For example, there may be like surveys, all those sort of things. And then there's sort of follow-up meeting after that, in which psychiatrists usually will discuss childhood traumas, all that sort of thing, parental sort of state of mind as well, and discuss whether or not they think that it's beneficial that your child is diagnosed with ADHD. And then after that, it's the choice of things like medication, for example. Me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of childhood medication, if I'm being honest with you. I'd rather that be saved for later on in life, just because it gives the child more of a chance to sort of understand themselves a bit more and understand how to build strategies. But if the behavior is, obviously in some cases with ADHD, it can be completely debilitating to the point where it's almost unmanageable, then that makes a lot more sense. But yeah, I think there is a more of a movement sort of away from medication. But what do
Yeah,
you
more
think
clear.
about what do you think about sort of childhood medication?
Um, I was okay, so I think I was 16
Right.
when I got onto medication.
Mm,
But for like my child psychiatrist also thought I had ADHD.
mm-hmm,
But I got sectioned quite a bit
mm-hmm,
through one of my 136 assessments.
mm.
They were talking about it and oh love the sound effects. Sorry. Um um with the 136 or something, she's like, you might have ADHD because my impulsiveness, if I want to do it, I would go, like whether it's to jump in front of a train or something like that, I would go and
Just go
do
do
it.
it. Right.
I didn't think about, the consequences, the impact on other people. I don't care. That
Right.
means I have to go kill people to try and kill myself. Great,
Right.
lovely, whatever. I
Mm,
would go to any extremes. And I didn't think, and then she was like, hmm. And then I didn't get sectioned that day, and then I ended up getting sectioned later on,
mm,
further,
mm,
um, on another day, a few days, and she's the psychiatrist at the hospital,
mm,
in Springfield. The other psychiatrist didn't agree because as a girl presents differently.
mm-hmm.
And she was like, no, no, she doesn't have a severe form of ADHD. If you're going to the point where you're killing yourself, it is a severe form of ADHD.
Yeah, debilitating, literally.
And literally, I didn't care. Like it was like my physical aggression like started like before I wasn't physically aggressive. It was a rare occasion, but
Mm,
it became more common if people would stop being trying to kill myself or harming myself.
mm,
I would go to any extremes and I wouldn't care.
mm,
And and then she wouldn't refuse to get my ADHD. I saw my child psychiatrist even when I was in hospital
mm,
every 2 weeks. Um, or no, I think it was every week or every 2 weeks.
Hmm.
And when I got released, she diagnosed me with released. When I got when my section ended, and I got an accommodation, I was discharged, and she diagnosed me with ADHD, and we started medication straight away.
Right.
And I was on atomoxetine. Luckily, first try, and it worked.
Hmm.
And I'm taking around 100 I used to take 110, but it didn't work because my weight was fluctuating. But
Mm.
100 milligrams of atomoxetine, and it helped me think about things. Oh
Right.
my God, I didn't think people had the ability to think about thoughts.
Yeah, metacognition.
Yeah, I was like, before I was gonna like try and kill myself, I'm like, because you have that 4 to 6 weeks where it's
Mm.
your body's getting used to it
Of
and
course,
making
yeah.
it work, trying to make it work. Like within like 2 weeks, I'm like, wait, you can think about things?
Mm.
I didn't know that existed.
Hmm.
I was like, oh, I thought people just did whatever they wanted as soon as they felt like it. Like
Yeah,
if you want to do it, you just go do it.
makes
So that was
sense.
different. I think I think medication is great if someone, it comes to the point where it's affecting their life so to the point where they can't do
Absolutely.
anything.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
feel like medication should always be a last resort.
Yes.
Or if you're going to do medication, you also need to do therapies.
Hmm.
So it's a holistic approach to it. But I
Yeah.
don't think it's helpful for, like, for example, if this child is in mainstream school and it doesn't work, and the SEN departments are um part of that person's care, then you're like, okay, this environment's not working. Let's try a specialist provision.
Yeah.
You could go through steps, but if it comes to the point where even the specialist provision can't take care of them,
Hmm.
and things are escalating, there's police coming in because that's
Right.
one of the most common things is um people with ADHD often end up going down the criminal justice route.
Yeah. And we don't want that.
We don't want that. If that means put them on medication, it's great, but not to the
Mm.
point where it takes away their personality and who they are.
Mm. Mm.
Because some people seem quite like a Walking Dead person,
Hmm.
and that's not what you want. That should never be the case.
Absolutely.
And the one thing is, I don't know this podcast, but it's full of like men. Sorry, that's not helpful, but it was full
No,
of
no.
men, and he's black, and I think he's from African household,
Heritage. Yeah.
and he had ADHD. It was a very severe form of ADHD. His
Mm.
parents refused to be like, oh, they think you're disabled, they think you're this, they think you're
Yes.
stupid, fucked up, da, da, da. And he didn't take medication, and it was really affecting him.
Hmm.
The schools were giving therapies, but without the parents' permission, he couldn't have
Couldn't
medication.
access it. Right.
But that medication could have had like a massive impact.
Mm.
But I feel like people need to try other approaches before they do. And I feel like if you're going to do medications, or even before medication, therapy and medication is important.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like, and if like before I left the hospital, I was on a 5-to-1.
Mm.
I was with 4 registered mental health nurses out in the
Wow.
community and one support worker
Mm.
there 24/7
Wow.
with me all the time, watching everything I do and stuff like that. Then you're like, okay, if it gets to that point as well, a really severe consequence of your actions, it should never be getting to that point.
Mm.
And I feel like, especially with girls, because has a different form, and girls are just seen as like chatty, a bit like bubbly, and
Of course, yeah.
doesn't mean they don't have ADHD, and that inattentiveness, that dissociation, that plays a
Yeah.
massive part as well. But I feel like medication always the last resort.
Mm. Definitely.
Yeah, but also I don't believe medication should ever be a thing where it's like a used alone. It's
Yeah,
medication and therapy and
definitely.
lifestyle changes that should be put into place.
Absolutely. And that's something we always talk about as well as lifestyle changes, diet choices, sleep, exercise, all those sort of things. And it's interesting you mentioned things like dissociation as well because a lot of people with ADHD dissociate, and I didn't know what that was until I sort of started getting into the mental health field because I always, as a child, I was very dreamy. Like I remember as a child, I just would be in class and then I wouldn't be in class, if you know what I mean. So physically I'm there, mentally I'm somewhere else completely. And I didn't know what that was. I just thought that was a thing that everyone did. but sort of like what you're saying, I had the ability to just to get through school at a pretty high level because I'm intelligent, you know, and that's what happens with people that are neurodiverse. Usually we just figure it out pretty much, you know, we know what's going to happen next pretty much. But you know what happens is, you know, I speak to a lot of my learners. One of my learners is so highly inattentive, you know, that I remember speaking to him about, you know, what I could do for him because that's what I say to my learners. What can I do for you? How can I help you? And he goes to me, um, nah, nothing really. I'm fine, you know. And I say, okay. And then I asked him a specific question. I said to him, do you feel confident actually asking for what you want? And he said, no, not really. And then I asked him again. I said, do you ever feel like asking for what you want is like quite difficult because you don't really like yourself that much? And he goes, well, yeah, I never really have, you know. So again, rooted in that sort of low self-esteem, that sort of guilt and sort of shame that we all sort of that is the sort of the biggest thing I notice with my learners is a lot of them have that sort of deep sense of shame and guilt and sort of self-loathing that sort of comes along with being neurodiverse. And even looking into some of the literature now, it's becoming a bit of a chicken and the egg problem. You know, it's like, you know, are we neurodiverse because we're born that way, or are we born that way because the environment, you know, that we existed in and it presents as neurodiverse? It's such an interesting discussion to have.
Mhm. I think it's like one thing that is like really like one thing that frustrates me is when parents are not supportive
Mm,
of schools going forward with a diagnosis. Nothing's going to change.
mm,
They're just going to have support and accommodations put into place
mm,
that'll make them more be able to do things. Like the one thing that I'm like when I was in like mainstream education, like nobody noticed anything.
mm.
I was highly dissociated. I was dissociated. And I'd be like smiling to myself. I'd be like,
Right,
like
yeah.
conversations. But because I was known as that, bubbly girl, she's always like okay, and she's smiling and
Mm,
da-da-da, and got the work done at the end, like before the end of the lesson.
absolutely.
They're like, okay, she doesn't have anything. Or like with my autism, I was non-verbal until I went into secondary school,
Wow.
and nobody noticed anything. My speaking was very minimal.
Mm,
Like it was if a teacher asked it, I was like, I would like mutter an answer or "What is this?" and da-da-da.
mm,
But nobody would notice.
mm.
But how do you think ADHD impacts a child's ability to focus, concentrate, and stay organized?
It's just it's can be completely debilitating, honestly. Like they, you know, it just it is almost as if, you know, as you can relate to as well, it's almost as if you just can't, you know. And you know, so the way the brain works, for example, with different neurotransmitters, you know, we know that dopamine is associated with, you know, paying attention and focus, and also the reward system. And with ADHD, you know, if you look at an ADHD brain, they usually have quite depleted dopamine levels, you know, so literally are at a biological disadvantage to focus. And on the other hand, though, what you then see is that a lot of people with ADHD struggle with things that sort of increase dopamine levels, things like gambling, things like online gaming, for example, things like social media. And it's literally because their brain is saying, we need more of this. This makes more sense because we naturally don't have this. And, you know, children, you know, teenagers, you know, with ADHD especially, you know, it's something to sort of watch over in terms of social medias. A lot of social media addiction, a lot of gambling addiction, a lot of sort of drug and alcohol addiction can come as a sort of substitute, to sort of build up the dopamine level. But it is more about creating natural dopamine that lasts a bit longer. So things like new experiences or enjoying certain foods or, you know, diet and exercise can naturally increase that dopamine. But yeah, like you said, it's completely debilitating. Sometimes it can be very, very difficult for a child to just sit there and stay focused, and you know, it affects how they should be taught as well. So one thing I do with some of my learners and some of my teachers is I use something called checking with chimes. So what I tell learners to do is I set a timer for every 5 minutes, and I want you to give yourself a point for every time you're doing a task within that 5 minutes when the timer goes off. And the goal is for you to try and beat that score every lesson. Then you can get like a prize at the end of the lesson or the end of the term or what have you. And it just adds that bit of motivation to sort of try to engage a bit better. But even that can be quite difficult to do.
Mm. Are there any specific strategies or accommodations that can be implemented to support those with ADHD in the classroom
Oh,
that you?
there's so many. So I use checking with charms, like I said. I use the sort of 5 to 10 minute walking break so they can deregulate emotionally or sort of mentally. Oh God, what else do I use? I try to encourage teachers to have learners with ADHD to sit more like away from doors and windows, so they're less near distractions, people walking by, cars going by, sort of sirens or what have you. Then there's exam access arrangements and assignment arrangements, so getting sort of plus 10 plus 10% of minutes allotted. That usually is highly beneficial. Sort of exceptions on homework. I try my best to get. I mean, it's obviously difficult, but to get tutors to not give ADHD learners as much homework, or if they're going to give them homework, encourage them to finish it after college, stay in college, finish, and then go home. Just because if they go home with it, it's just not going to get done realistically. And then I encourage, teachers to give hyperactive learners with ADHD tasks in class, so things like handing out books or like going to offices to get certain things or what have you, just getting them up and about. Just there's so many different strategies you can use within a classroom. Even how you present information as well, making sure it's clear and unambiguous can be really beneficial. Giving really sort of 1 to 2, maximum 3 if you can, choices when making decisions. Helping people manage transitions is vital for ADHD. So when things are going to change, it could be classroom changes, it could be homework changes or curriculum changes. Giving them that sort of time, or having someone in class that can help with them getting out of their hyperfocus. So, like for example, as you know, hyperfocus can be very difficult to get out of. So, if you know that this class ends in 15 minutes, have someone 15 minutes before just say, "Oh, the class is going to end in 15 minutes." Just make sure you're getting ready to go, sort of thing. So, yeah, tons of things you could do in the classroom. Just takes a bit of ingenuity.
So, how do you think ADHD affects a child's social interaction and relationship with peers?
Oh my goodness, it has a massive effect. So with ADHD, there is that sort of ingrained fear of rejection in the first place. So what you might see with ADHD is sort of a link to sort of attachment, and people with ADHD can become the class clown because really they're trying to gain some sort of attachment from their peers. They're trying to appear as someone who's funny or who's bubbly or who's talkative, and it is that deep rooted, like I spoke before, that deep rooted sense of rejection that can happen as a result of ADHD. So what you might see is a lot of learners, a lot of young people, for example, with ADHD, a lot of people in general with ADHD may have quite one-sided or unfulfilling relationships. They might be in relationships with people, friendships or romantic relationships with people who essentially get more from them than they do from than they receive is pretty much unreciprocated, and that's because of attachment. Usually attachment issues as a result of ADHD, and it can be quite difficult to navigate. And people with ADHD usually make fantastic friends and can be very compassionate, very empathetic, and can listen really well. And those are the characteristics of excellent partners too. But what happens is people can use that and sort of play on that going forward, and that can make it quite difficult to tell who's a true friend or a true partner or someone who's really for you or just what you present. So yeah, it's very, very difficult with sort of interpersonal social relationships for people with ADHD.
Do you believe that there are any longer-term effects of childhood ADHD on social development?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, what we already see with any sort of childhood development with ADHD or any sort of neurodiversity is the effect it has on the brain to develop socially. Obviously you talk about neurotransmitters being poorly developed, like dopamine. Serotonin is also poorly developed, so it's harder to rest and retain information, for example. So that can even affect things like remembering people's names. People with ADHD are notoriously horrible at remembering people's names. I am one of those people. I can't remember names for anything, and as a result, people can find that quite offensive sometimes. Just in a sort of base one to one sort of thing. Oh, you forgot my name, maybe you forgot me. No, it's just my brain. I just can't do it. Um, so that can definitely affect sort of neurotransmitters, brain development in children can be affected by ADHD, and it is. I'm looking sort of more and more into this research, but I do think that there is a link between PTSD and ADHD, or at least complex PTSD and ADHD. I think that the more we go on within this field, I believe in about 15 to 20 years, maybe longer, I believe that the two may become indistinguishable in sort of how we sort of diagnose them, simply because there are just so many similarities between the two. And I think it's about creating societies that aim to alleviate, these sort of things. So addressing things like systemic racism and things like systemic ableism or sexism, addressing sort of wider social ills that are causing specific groups to be diagnosed with ADHD more and more. Because if you look at the numbers, it is specific people from specific sort of circumstances that is they are being diagnosed with.
Trauma does actually change the brain if you look at those X-rays and stuff like that.
Literally,
Um,
yeah.
what role do you think family dynamics play in managing and supporting a person with ADHD?
It's just imperative. The hardest thing in my job is just telling people how to parent, and it's something that I find very difficult, because first of all, who am I to do that? But secondly, I don't have children myself, but secondly, it's it's helping them understand that creating an environment and a home that is just so psychologically safe and accepting of the child and accepting of strategies to help them manage their symptoms is just absolutely imperative for that child to manage their ADHD and help maybe alleviate some symptoms even going forward. What we see usually sort of in research and in daily practice, in my own practice, is that a lot of students that have ADHD come from very traumatized homes, homes in which addiction is prevalent, home in which there's disabilities, health concerns, homes in which you're coming from single parent households, for example, homes in which they've experienced trauma themselves as parents, and what we see is a lot of parents are struggling with their own mental health issues and their own neurodiversity issues and their own ableist disabilities, and that affects how you parent your children. It also affects sort of the narratives you feed your children about the wider society and what they should expect from society. So family dynamics and also plain and simply how your parents look when they're together is vital to how children sort of perceive relationships and perceive their own mental health and physical health. Are you the type of people that are constantly arguing in front of your children? Are you the type of people that are constantly poorly feeding your children when it comes to nutrition, creating poor habits when it comes to sleep and exercise? Are you the type of people that aren't honest with your children or are too honest with your children, which can also be debilitating as well? Some children should know every single thing about their parents' lives, or anything or nothing about their parents' lives. Do you talk about other people a lot, which can create things like insecurity in appearance and all that sort of things? Do you talk about how do you talk about the other parent when the parent isn't there in front of your children? All of these sort of things have a direct impact in sort of how ADHD can sort of manifest, and why family dynamics are just vital in creating a system that can alleviate some of the symptoms.
Amazing. But what do you do to parents who are not happy with your
Mhm.
inputs, or like they're just not happy with their child? Like, if you're going to be like, okay, they might have ADHD, or they have, and diagnosis might be imperative for them to get the support they need, whether it's like, through an HCP plan, which will help you implement things.
Hmm.
Um, how do you like?
It is difficult. So it's I've had it before during an EHCP review where I've had parents in, and they've just been completely almost in denial about everything I've been talking about. In section with trauma, all that sort of stuff, and it's first of all, it's depersonalizing me from it. So I'm not saying it because I'm judging you. Like I don't know you, I don't know what you guys have been through. I'm saying it because, like you, we're having this meeting because we want the best for your child. Now, this isn't me critiquing your parent style. This is me critiquing a society that creates the kind of parents you are. And when you sort of depersonalize yourself and sort of help them understand like specific systemic things that could affect how they parent, or or at least allude to them, then they become less combative and go, actually, you know what, yeah, that is true. This did happen or this didn't happen, and it isn't your fault or isn't my fault, but it's something that we need to address. So yeah, so just removing the personal aspect of that, because I don't want to, I try not to sort of act like I know everything, because I don't, and there's always more you can know.
Mhm. So do you it when do you ever find that, you know, sometimes with the EHC plan there might like a review meeting or something, there might be a social worker
Mhm.
as well as a caseworker, and virtual school might be there as well. Do you find that the presence of social services has an effect on how parents respond?
That's a great question, and I've done like I think 10 EHCPs now. I've never had a social worker in an EHCP, but I have realized that the one of the ones I had where there was me and another member of staff, my Senko actually, who was in an EHCP. It did affect the dynamics of the meeting because she had come in after I started it, and all of a sudden, when there is this, um, I don't know if I might
Authority.
relate to social, yeah, sort of authority figure exactly, because as you can imagine, I'm kind of young for what I do. Um, so when there's sort of an older person who's an authority figure, it changes the whole dynamic of the meeting. So now it's like this person who has, let's say, 20, 25 years of experience sort of backing me up. It's like, oh, okay, maybe that might change it. And I imagine with social workers as well, you know, I I've not had my own sort of personal interaction with social worker and parenting, but people I know that have had it, it's like sometimes parents can feel a bit insecure having social workers there because it's almost like a government aided critique of them not necessarily doing their job. And I think deep down, like we've always spoken about, rejection or fear of rejection or fear of not being good enough is something that everyone struggles with. And fear of not being a good enough parent is something that is very, 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 very prevalent in sort of being a parent, that sort of thing.
Sorry, my face did.
Ah,
It's, um, my face didn't is not reacting to what you said. It was the noise. I'm so sorry.
it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Must have been off pissing. I'm so sorry. Feel bad.
No, 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 it's fine.
Um. So, like, it's really like, because it's really like, as a former looked after child, and
Yeah.
even in my like meetings now, because I'm a care leaver,
Mm.
it's really strange when I hear there's no social work. I know there's not always social services like allocated. What am I saying? Question. Social worker in those meetings,
Yeah.
and it's like it's really for me. It's like really strange because in my
Mm.
meetings, like the size may not be helpful, but there's a lot of people that is involved in my care. So in my HCP, there'll be like 20 different people,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it's like really it could be really overwhelming because my net parents never been part of my HCP plans, but
Mm.
it could be really helpful having everybody in, but it's also 20
Mm.
different voices to listen to.
Yeah. Do
Every
you do
20
you, do you find that that's like beneficial? Like having, would you rather it be loads of people or like a few people in EHCPs?
the why I would say loads of people is because like in my care, there's like, for example, my therapist I see twice a week. I use
Mm.
a lot of phone support from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. I see them for 2.5 hours a week in person.
Mm.
Like, and then my social worker I see every 2 weeks. I'll see her
Mm.
for 3, 4 hours.
Mm.
And then like my psychiatrist I'll see every 2 weeks for like 2 hours. And everybody I have a really close relationship with, and I do different work with
Mm.
them. So they all see a different side, which can be very difficult because because of the work that you're doing, you see, you know, depending on the work that you do with a young person, you'll see different sides. But it is also very helpful. But it also has its
Mm,
challenges.
mm,
Um, because and especially when you've had long-term relationships with people, people are extremely protective as well.
mm. I
Which
can imagine.
is yeah, but it's a tight-knit network. But not everybody has, the privilege of having that. We,
Hmm.
and when they have like one or two person attend, and I feel like when there isn't, I feel like when there isn't, I feel like there should be at least five different people in a meeting from five different
Mm,
agencies because that shows that there is support put into place. Like
hmm.
what I was invited to EHCP, it wasn't mine, it was somebody else's, and there was two people there, and this person has a severe um it is on the severe end of ADHD trauma and eating disorder, and there are three people there, and you're like, okay, it's the care coordinator. What am I talking about? Caseworker, not care coordinator, caseworker, the school, and that person, and their carers. I'm like, so with somebody with high level needs, why is there only three people? Where's the support network?
Yeah.
Because that person should be receiving therapy for the eating. Why does it have to go to a point where it's unrepairable or close to
Mm.
unrepairable for a person to receive support or sorry, that was a fly, somebody who was, oh fuck, somebody who's, sorry, somebody who then when it comes, or somebody who has high levels of risk, and because of that, your job is could be, sorry, I'm trying to form my thoughts. Your
Go for
job
it.
could be at risk,
Mm,
your career, your DBS. Why does it have to get to that point for you to do stuff and put the care and make sure that the care that's put into place is it's it's substantial and more than adequate?
mm,
Until I feel like until people's jobs, I feel like and people are like, oh my God, the risk is high. Wait, that's the reason why we're putting support. But no, let's be realistic. It had to get to a point, majority of the time, where people's jobs are at stake and people's
mm,
livelihoods
mm,
for there to be something put into place that is more than adequate.
mm.
But until then, sorry, I have very strong views.
No, no, it's good. It's good. I agree with you. I think I've done reviews where literally like no one's turned up. I've done reviews where there's one person. I've done reviews where there's like five people, and I do agree with the fact that, there needs to be more of an input. I mean, I get that people work and sometimes you can't make every single review, but there needs to be more of an input into this like pretty important legal document that is vital for so many things. That is highly funded as well, by the way, from more than one or two people. Because realistically, I mean, there's even now more discussion about educational healthcare plans in general. In terms of like how viable they are and do they actually work. And all that sort of stuff. And it's like, from my perspective, I don't really see staff members engaging with educational healthcare plans that consistently. Like they might do it after the review, maybe a week or two after the review. But if you have a class with, let's say, 30 children, right, and four have EHCPs, that is very, very difficult to go every single lesson, every single week, for example, to make sure you're keeping up with the outcomes of that EHCP. So I think maybe there might be a change in how we sort of look at EHCPs and what we actually use them for, or if they even exist going forward. Because I think the people that have had them, in my experience, haven't had the best experience with them.
Hmm. I feel like EHCP plans is copy and paste from different documents most of the
Oh,
time.
100%, yeah.
And I'm like the amount of times that I read Royce Me has a lot of Rosemary has been physically, emotionally, and verbally abused by her parents, and was sexually abused by her mother's two brothers. This has been going on through her whole life. Um, and she was removed from care when she was 14 years, and so I'm like, bitch, I read this so many times, I've memorized it. Like, change it up. There was this time where I was like, this is way after, and I was like, bored. I'm okay. I have a life. For those who are listening, I do have a life, and this is not what I do when I'm bored sometimes. But like, I was reading over my HCP plan, and I was like, this is shit. And this was like 4 months after it was done,
Mm.
and I sent it back, and I'd be like to my social worker and be like, that is not my EHC plan. That is not going to be my EHC plan. Fix it. Get if I want another one
Mm.
because this is all copy and paste. So I could give you that information by giving you several of my documents. And
That's
I'm
it.
like, just
It's they're so depersonalized. Like they're like you say, they come from different people who have maybe met you once or twice, if that, for example, or have written a report about you when you were like 7, and like and they just add that to the plan and just like don't update it ever again. Like I've looked at like language in the HCPs that like talk about a 17-year-old boy liking like toy cars, for example, and it's like this hasn't been updated since he was 9. Can we can we have a look at this plan, for example? It's
yeah.
it's, it's
And like
crazy.
and then like there's like certain things that I've like written. Like I was
Mm,
I'm the person that was really involved. I'm like I will critique every little small thing. And trust me, when I go through my EHC plan, I go through my EHC plan.
yeah,
And
so you
some
should.
people don't have, the concentration or the cognitive ability or whatever to do it.
Mm,
And, whether it's parents or the carers or somebody has to be there to be like, this is not good enough. This is what's going to get the support that they need. So take it back, redo it again.
mm,
Because I'm more happy to say that with my care. But I
mm,
know not everybody has the confidence or the ability to do that.
mm.
And that's a problem. And also, have you ever been to a CTR?
No, I haven't.
So people see this version of myself, an articulate young person, whatever, and
Yeah.
I feel like this also happens in HCPs, and for people, that see people with smaller networks or not in care or something like that, and they'd be like, okay, well, this person is articulate, so they don't have the needs that they have.
Mm,
But you are an independent board who has no relationship to me, and you're seeing me for an hour or two with
mm,
this version,
mm,
and you're undermining the struggles and the challenges that I have because you're seeing such a fake person.
mm.
Let me rephrase that better.
No,
Such
no,
a ma I
a
masked
mask.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's like
yeah. It's almost hard for them to imagine, you at your basically when you're at the full end of the other spectrum, when you're really struggling with all your symptoms, because they see you as this sort of very articulate, very intelligent person for a couple hours, and they go, actually, you're all right. It's like you don't see me when I'm on my own, for example, and things are really difficult.
mm. And it's really like, and I feel like they also there sometimes comes where people with like if it's an independent board, they
Mm,
undermine the authority of people, the authority that experiences that the people who meet people on a regular basis have.
mm,
Or what when I say the authority, I mean like the experiences they had, how they see me at my lowest point,
mm,
and they know this is all just a facade. Like I
mm.
can be like this, when I hate these terms, but high functioning.
Yeah.
But I'm like, majority of the time, this is not the version that people see.
No, no. It's interesting you say you hate the term high functioning. Where do you stand on the whole like ADHD and autism are superpowers sort of thing?
I've said it before
Mm,
because for people to understand, it's not a degrading. It's not just they don't just see the degrading side.
mm,
But I'm like, there's things that I can do that you can't do. Like I'm
definitely.
talking to like people who don't have like neurodiversity. But I'm like, is it a superpower? Is it like it gives me a cape, but it also gives me a hurricane, a
Yeah,
tornado that pulls me down from flying?
yeah. Yeah,
I'm like,
literally. Yeah. There's because lots of I was watching I was reading a critique about a Diary of a CEO episode not too long ago,
oh,
in
Steve
which
Bartlett, I love him.
yeah, yeah,
Anyway, so
he is really cool. And he was talking about because he's recently been diagnosed with ADHD. And this lady had written a really interesting critique where she said, you know, as much as there are things that people that are neurodiverse can do that others can't do, realistically, things like ADHD aren't superpowers. They're actually incredibly debilitating. And she was talking about how because he is a multi-millionaire, who you know who's again quote unquote high functioning, and has what five or so businesses, it's easy to talk from a position of privilege about ADHD being a superpower. But in reality, for the majority of people that have it, that isn't really the case. So I found that quite an interesting critique, and she was saying that he would have done better if when he'd been diagnosed with it on air, which is again, which is a privilege because not many people can do that. Diagnosis for some people can take up to 3 4 years. He should have spoke about sort of some of the economic barriers about getting diagnosis and like sort of critiquing the system. It's quite an interesting critique.
I feel like also I feel, I feel like he has, the finances, but he wants, to make all these happen, all these things happen like
Mm,
this. Also, he wasn't in that position before. But I'm like, for me, I'm like, I can't really say anything because my ADHD diagnosis was immediate.
mm,
Once another psychiatrist was like to my, consultant psychiatrist, the person that is my care coordinator, this is what's going on. And
mm-hmm,
she agreed. I've had that diagnosis, but I had to wait. I was getting in hospital, but that's just because of like other reasons. But ah, I just find it like frustrating
mm,
when
mm.
people don't understand. Oh, I lost what I was going to say. I'm just now rambling. What
No,
was
no, rambling's good. Rambling's good. We were talking about Stephen Butler and getting diagnosed with ADHD on air and how it comes from a position of privilege because obviously he's rich. And then you said that you got diagnosed really quickly by your
Yeah, so
care
I
coordinator.
can't, but I can't say anything. With my autism diagnosis, I think I got it done within a few weeks.
Mm,
But these are the privileges that I have being a looked after child or being hospitalized as well.
mm. I mean,
Because
do you think those are privileges or do you think those are things that just happen to you?
I don't think they're privileges, but I often call these, I feel like these are basic human rights.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I understand people who wait 4 years to get a diagnosis of autism or ADHD or
Mm,
any diagnosis. And I feel like I do have the upper hand
mm,
in the situation where if I was not in care or if I didn't have such, uh, like certain people in my life, I wouldn't have this.
mm.
But I believe if you think somebody has ADHD or autism, I feel like assessments should be done within at least a week or two.
That would be ideal. That would definitely
Mm.
be ideal. But I just think there's just the NHS
Some,
is too poorly funded to even facilitate that sort of thing. And
you
I
know
think
what's not poorly funded? Tory
what
party.
the Tory exactly, yeah, the Tory party is I mean, they're funded by billionaires. Um, but
Oh, this is what I was going to say. I remember now. Oh,
go
hmm.
on.
I remember what I was going to say. And people need to understand, like, I'm going to use like autism as an example because it's more easier, but
Mm,
it's same thing applies for all different types of neurodiversities. Not every person with autism is going to be Elon Musk, Albert Einstein, what's the other one called? Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
Not everybody's going to end up. That's 1% of the 1%.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
Literally, I mean, you're right. They're literally rare people. They're very, very rare people who, I mean, you know, are very specific circumstances. Elon Musk is the son of a sapphire billionaire. He owns mines in South Africa, you know. And even though he disowned his son and didn't give him any money, Elon Musk still had the privilege of going to some of the top schools in the world. So he had literally the best education in the world. Um, you know, Bill Gates,
Connections.
what's that?
Connections as well.
Exactly, connections, networking. Bill Gates, I think, he had the privilege of going to, I think it was, I want to say Harvard or Yale, I can't remember, but he went to one of the top universities on the planet, I think on a scholarship too, which is pretty cool for him. But the guy, these are people that are complete outliers when it comes to talking about neurodiversity. The average person who is neurodiverse isn't anywhere anything like those people you just mentioned. It's quite,
Mm.
it can be quite difficult.
And I feel like people need to recognize that because somebody is intelligent or something like that, and intelligent and have ADHD, autism, or any sort of neurodiversity, they're not going to end up like these people.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
What do you think are potential barriers, except, the NHS for funding
Yeah.
and overworked individuals? What are some of the potential barriers to accessing appropriate diagnosis and treatment for children with ADHD?
Um, you know, Simply sometimes it can even be things like location, where you live, in proximity to sort of places that can allow you healthcare can be a huge barrier. Things like parental understanding of ADHD or neurodiversity overall, so like things like culture can be quite difficult. I mean, being of West African descent, I know that getting West African parents to admit that their children has ADHD is almost impossible sometimes because they see it as a disability, which then sees them as a ward of the state or highly dependent on other people. So different cultures. I mean, a lot of cultures nowadays, or the Western culture overall, is like hyper individualized. Everything's like sort of do it for yourself. So as soon as some people realize that they have something that can help with sort of that should be given to them by the government, they almost reject it because we have a high emphasis on things like individual responsibility and pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. Partly because of people like Elon Musk, by the way, who sort of use this rhetoric, but also like you say because of the Tory party. So overall culture.
Oh,
Uh,
well, just to
go on.
clarify, when I said Tory party, I do agree with the Tory party being well funded, but I was talking about the parties that they do have.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so yeah, and sort of spreading that sort of rhetoric about being hyper individualized and not needing to depend on anyone else. Those sort of cultural, sort of wide scale cultural sort of understandings from not only just Western society, but specific groups that have emigrated to this country. It's like I said, highly prevalent in the West African community and African community overall in this country. And from what I understand and what I've read, highly prevalent in things like the British Chinese community, and sometimes in the British Indian community. So yeah, lots of barriers culturally, economically, in terms of location where you live as well, and sometimes even understanding that the help is even there. So parents might not understand or be able to access SEND services or healthcare services just because they don't understand sort of what their behavior might be or what the behavior
Mm.
is. Even education about your symptoms as well, understanding what your symptoms are. Like me and you said, we grew up thinking that people, you know, not understanding that people aren't impulsive. I didn't understand that some people don't decide to just jump from their bed to their sister's bed and jump back and forth because that they wanted to do it. I didn't know that was a thing. I thought
That
that
was
that's everyone.
very specific. Did you do
Yeah,
that?
I did that. I did that a lot. And in fact, one time I actually broke her bed because I jumped too far and my mom went insane. But to be fair, yeah,
I would
that
have. Oh my God, I like. Oh, wait, you let your wait. You said, oh, yeah, it was your sister's bed that you broke. So she was definitely going to say something to your mother.
no, no,
Oh
it
my,
was my sister's bread I broke. And so what I think what ended up happening, she ended up just sleeping in my mom's room, and I ended up just sleeping on my bed, and then her bed was just like defunct for like ages, and no one because we couldn't afford to get a new one basically. So we just sort of left it there for a bit until we could afford to get a new one. But I thought that behavior of like doing like thinking about something and doing it was like normal. I thought it was like a normal thing. I didn't know it was a symptom of anything. I thought that like zoning out, which is what I called it back then, it for ages in maths was like a regular thing. I would come into maths, for example. I was in the top set of maths at school, and I come into maths, and I couldn't tell you a single thing I learned. I would just go in there and just completely just not be in the room, you know. And I
Mm.
go away and I do the homework. I come back and I do pretty well. And I didn't know that's a thing. I thought, how the hell you guys? Because I do this thing as a child, for example. I look around and be like, oh, people are actually writing stuff down. I should probably write stuff down. You know, I didn't realize that's actually like what's going on here. In exams, I sit there and be like, oh, wow, this is people are serious about this. So yeah,
Oh my God. The thing is, I didn't know, like, I've not, like, revision for me is a new thing
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
I've done, but like, I just thought, everybody starts revising and we have revision periods as well. And I'm like, why are people revising? I don't understand.
No,
I thought people
no.
just went in there, like, like, from my experience, I just went in there, I got a good score, that was it. And it was like that for a very long time.
Hmm.
I just, I didn't
Literally.
see the point of revision. I thought everybody could, like, I should have understood when people are revising and are taking revision seriously. Should have understood at that point, but I thought everybody just, like, most people could just go in there, get a good grade, and come out.
That's literally what. Yeah, I remember thinking the same thing as a kid. I thought, oh, that's just what happened. You just go in there, do like maybe like last minute like sort of scan of like your like your textbook or whatever, then you're good to
Like a
go. You
robot,
know.
like.
Yeah, yeah,
But
and you're good to go. So
if you
yeah,
don't
that's
mind me
interesting.
asking, this
Go
is
on.
quite personal, so you can just,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah. Go for it.
do do you or parents accept that you have ADHD, or does your
So it's interesting. So both my parents have passed away actually. So it's no, this part I really don't mind talking about it at all. So my father passed away early this year. My mother passed away now, well, just over 10 years ago. So neither of them really had any clue that I had ADHD, to be honest with you, which was quite interesting. And neither of them would have even, I don't think, considered me having ADHD as a child. I remember my mum, my mum would complain to me as a child about me like not doing homework or like me like always like spending hours on Xbox or like I don't know like playing football or something like instead of like doing work and then like it would come to exam season and I do really well and like she would complain about me not being able to stay focused or like I remember as a child I'd always fidget with things like I'm fidgeting right now you just can't see it I'd always fidget with things and she would be like you know why are you doing that you know that sort of thing and put it down or whatever and then I think there was a shift in her parenting sort of when I was about sort of 14 to 15 I'd say where she sort of realized I was doing pretty well with what I was doing anyway so she sort of like whatever sort of thing, you know, like she sort of started to ease back a little bit and she realized I was actually doing pretty well and sort of academically and athletically and stuff. So and with my dad, I don't think my dad would have really considered it to be honest with you. I don't think he really I've never really spoke to him about any sort of neurodiversity or any sort of disability. I don't think he would have considered it. I don't think any of them would have. But my siblings, I spoke to my siblings about it, and chasing my diagnosis and stuff like that, and they're like, yeah, 100%, you definitely have it,
They're like,
So
if I could
that's
give you the
quite interesting.
diagnosis myself, I would.
Literally, no, literally, literally. I think my little sister was like to me, yeah, that's you, 100%, So yeah, I think if I showed them, if they were here and I showed them now, they would be like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Because
You
the
think
good thing
they'll
is
be
my parents
accepting
were.
of it?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. My parents were. The good thing is that, even coming from sort of West African culture, specifically Ghanaian culture, which can be quite closed-minded, my parents were sort of relatively open-minded in regards to that. They weren't like, I'm not saying they were like super duper progressive people, but like they would have been like, oh, okay, that makes sense as to why you used to do this or why you used to do that. And they're pretty rational people as well. Sometimes, of course, that isn't always the case, but yeah, I think they would have been all right with it.
Hmm. Can you discuss the importance of learning intervention? I mean, learning event. Can you discuss the importance of early intervention and
I was gonna
proactive
say.
support?
I was gonna say learning intervention. I was like, oh damn, I don't even know what that is. um, so yeah, it's important to have interventions as early as possible, just to aid sort of education. It's age strategies and age sort of strategies being implemented. I think the earlier you have intervention when it comes to things like neurodiversity, the better long-term outcomes. I was reading a book by I don't know if you heard of Gabor Mate. He's really cool when it comes to ADHD. So he's like a leading sort of physicist, and he talks about ADHD quite a lot and sort of addiction culture. And one of the things in his books he speaks about is that a lot of people with ADHD actually go their whole lives undiagnosed. So what happens is you end up using really ineffective coping strategies to sort of get through life, and you have no idea why that is. So what can happen with early intervention is you can alleviate that sort of identity crisis or struggling sort of interpersonal relationships or work or any sort of relationship or just life in general, and help them understand this is what I have. It's not my label, but this is what I have, and this is how I can help sort of alleviate some of those symptoms.
How does transition from adolescence to adulthood affect the management of ADHD symptoms?
That's a really good question, actually, and I think I'm gonna have to ground it in my own sort of experience a little bit, because looking back as a teenager when it came to my ADHD, one of the things, like I said to you, I struggled with was being attentive at school. And I remember all of a sudden, I got to university, and I remember like all of a sudden, I just started doing really, really poorly. And it's because I sort of realized that actually I had sort of run my course in my ability to get through education without actually putting that much work in. Because university is harder than school. So I had to learn to build organizational strategies to help me manage my work. So it wasn't enough for me to just glance through a textbook the night before an essay was due. That wouldn't cut it anymore. So I had to actually actively do it. So one of the things I had to use was something called the Pomodoro technique, which is basically revising or studying for sort of a specific amount of time and using specific short breaks. So I would work for about 15, 20 minutes and use five breaks. And that was me sort of understanding how my ADHD works and how it works in relationship to me becoming an adult and what that may look for, sort of professionally. So that transition from becoming a teenager to becoming an adult is realizing that you're gonna have to engage in the world of work or in further study, and your strategies are gonna have to be a bit more robust, because what might end up happening is that your old strategies that worked as a teenager or as a child aren't necessarily going to work as an adult. So you need to do a bit of sort of soul searching, a bit of research about what may benefit you when you become an adult.
So how did you, so how did it work? So did you would like study for 20 minutes and take like a 5-minute break?
Yeah. Well, so what would happen though is like I do that for like three, like I do three rounds of that, and then I just like would just like I don't know, do something else. And it was me. The first thing was like I didn't realize that I had to do this at the time, but I realized I have to do it now. Is be a bit kinder to myself. I'd be really hard on myself if I couldn't get through like 3 hours of work at university. A, because I didn't know why I couldn't get through it, but B, because I just assumed that that's what you had to do really well. And I looked around, and some of the smartest people in my course were doing stuff like that, and I thought, why I just can't do that. I hate the fact I hate myself for not being able to do that those sort of things. So understanding to be kind to myself is like, actually I've done a cumulatively an hour of solid work. That's enough for today. I should be all right. But it's something that you know I still do to this day, and it actually helps. I think I really think almost increase my concentration a little bit. It's almost like going to the gym and like building
Mm.
progressive overload. You start off with like a really light weight, so you build up a little bit. So I think it's helped a lot. But yeah, I think I just had to be a bit nicer to myself as a student, definitely.
It's so like it's so interesting
Mm,
because I work in much smaller time slots.
hmm
So I'll study for 10 minutes and I'll take a 10-minute break.
hmm
I'll study for 10 minutes and take a 10-minute break. Sometimes when I'm really into it, I'll be like, no, I won't take a break. My
hmm
two severity, she'll be like, no, you're gonna take a break because it's like if I continue working for 20, 30 minutes, it's all going to come crashing down.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. And it's
It's
having
like,
that fine balance and understanding it, right?
yeah, even if it's like 20 minutes and they're like, no, 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 I don't want a break. It's like, we're taking a break. And I'm like,
Mm,
I feel like that's the person, that's the sort of person that I need in my life.
hmm
To, like, like in everything I do, it's like, we need to take a break now.
hmm
Be like, okay, we need to stop watching this film because you can't sit still and you need to walk around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Or like, for example, if I'm sitting with someone, I would start holding their hand, and then I would be like doing circles, like like massage sort of circles in their hand. And if they have ADHD, it doesn't work. They're like, stop touching me, I can't concentrate. And be like, but I need to fidget with something, and I don't have something right now.
Mhm.
So yeah, popcorn only lasts for so long. So yeah. What are the unique challenges like? Because do you want okay? Because the adult, I feel like is childhood or ADHD more your speciality than adulthood?
I feel like I work with both realistically.
Oh, okay.
So cool,
If you're unable to answer the question, that's absolutely fine. I'm
cool.
gonna skip it. That's absolutely fine as well. Do you need a break?
No, I'm all right. I feel decent. Yeah, I feel good.
Right. So, what are the unique challenges that individuals with ADHD face when entering the workforce?
Oh my goodness. So this is something that I work with a lot of staff that have ADHD as well. I think one of the biggest challenges is employers understanding what ADHD is. Um, what what I've seen, and please people don't kill me for this, but what I've seen in the workforce is that primarily older members of staff who are usually in management or leadership positions don't have a great understanding of what ADHD actually is. They usually have an old school understanding of ADHD, which is that you have it when you're a kid and you grow out of it, and if you still have it when you're an adult, you're kind of lazy, and that's just a ridiculous statement. So what I usually see is that reasonable adjustments aren't really understood sometimes. So things like instructions, helping people understand using their calendars or reminders on their sort of emails or notes. These things aren't really implemented as much just because people don't understand why they should be beneficial. And also, even more broadly in the world of work, we have a culture that really emphasizes production and overproduction in a lot of cases. So what you may see is that what production looks like for me might be different for you. But if our manager favors what it looks like for you, then I'm in trouble, you know? So if production for them is you can't go on your phone, you have like two toilet breaks from now to the end of the day, and you have to be sort of on Teams all day or whatever your software is, for
Mm,
example. Um, that doesn't work for me. Like I have to be able to sit down and work for 20 minutes, and I might get up and go for a walk, or I might get up and go fill my water bottle up, or just deregulate, or maybe even go on my phone or check social media or what have you, or do something that's different. Um, and it's understanding what that looks like, and understanding that that's going to help me be productive in the long term. Um, and understanding as well that that doesn't make me lazy. uh, Another thing I see is also in the world of work is just fostering a culture of really, as I said before in the beginning, real psychological safety. You know, there. I'm not necessarily saying that managers have to share their most intimate details with employees. I wouldn't say that at all. But what I would say is being quite honest and open in regards to the workplace or in regards to just in general about how you're feeling about certain things. Because when you have that transparency with someone that you're managing and someone who's underneath you or above you, it does help foster a good relationship. And as a result, when you have a good relationship with someone, you do feel more comfortable talking to them about things that are bothering you, about reasonable adjustments, or about even things like doctor's appointments coming up, or you have your children's, I don't know, play coming up or whatever. And also in the world of work, we have a culture of exploitation. A lot of companies will work their employees to the bone if possible, and they will do it with no remorse. And when you burn out, they'll get someone else to do it. You know, when you allow for exploitation, you really allow for a culture of toxicity. Because there are some people who will do anything to exploit people, and when that happens, it can be quite difficult. And usually, it is people that have neurodiversity, that have disabilities, that are from marginalized backgrounds, that end up being exploited more than others. So if you can avoid those sort of things, that can help create a more welcome, safe space for people with ADHD and people just in general.
mm. the one thing is, if you have ADHD, you have autism, whether it's a physical or disability or neurodiversity, or you
Hmm.
have social emotional mental health needs,
Hmm.
is to get access to work as well, because
Hmm.
that is amazing resources. I think it's up to
Absolutely. Yeah.
£66,000 a year for one person,
Hmm.
and they'd be able to provide you accommodation, transportation. They will also be able to advocate on your behalf, make sure you have the adequate occupational health assessments and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so ha- I have a question to ask you.
Hmm.
So um, so it will be 2 hours. I mean, in sorry, it will be 2 hours in 25 minutes.
Mm.
Would you want to finish this section of questions, because we also do have another 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 session scheduled
Mm.
for in three mm, in 3 weeks,
Hmm.
which I can change to the 27th if you like.
Let me double check. So 27th sounds. I think I'm busy on the 27th actually. I
Oh,
think I'm
okay,
away.
right.
When,
So
when's
on
the,
the
when's the next session again? Let me double check.
is on the 3rd of February.
3rd of February. Let me double check. That should be fine. Yeah, that'll be fine. Yeah, no worries about that.
So do you want to finish this section now?
Yeah, yeah, no worries.
And then Mm, yeah. So just so you know, there's 16 questions left for this section.
Hmm.
Um, there might be less because I will just delete them as it goes. Okay, I lied. There is way more. There's probably around 16 questions to 20 questions left.
Hmm.
Um, if you've already answered them, I probably would delete them as go along, so it's not
Hmm.
gonna count. So are you ready to get started again?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely.
How does the need for increased independence and responsibility impact individuals with ADHD during transitions to adulthood?
It can be very, very difficult, having that ability to be independent if that's not something that you've been taught to do, especially when it comes to ADHD, which can be very debilitating, can be very difficult to navigate, especially in adulthood. Things like living situations, all of a sudden now you're helping out, you're in a home that you're responsible for council tax, all of those sort of things. You have to be really responsible for necessarily reading the fine print of whatever it is you're signing, whatever it is you're doing in your job, car payments, or all that sort of stuff. So, and that can be very difficult for people, for example, in attentive ADHD who might miss small details and certain things. So it's just it is important to have someone, it could be a friend, it could be maybe a family member, whoever, to have someone that can just help you double check these sort of things. I have someone, my girlfriend, who helps me double check sort of things when I read them, just to make sure that I've understood them perfectly, which can be quite difficult for people with ADHD.
Hmm. Yeah, I saw my tenancy agreement. It was 7 pages and was double-sided. Why is a tenancy agreement that long?
So like, it's just ridiculous. It's just a
And
ridiculous
they're
thing to
like,
read.
what, service charge? What do you
Yeah.
mean service charge? Why am I paying £50 for a service charge?
Yeah. What does that even mean?
Yeah, and I'm like, is there something I should be aware of? I'd be like, if you're charging £50 for a service charge,
Mm.
I'm like, what is wrong with the house? The point where, um, yeah, I'm like, what's going on? Like, the another thing is, which I find a bit like, is is like, it's so much information, and you're like, this is all irrelevant. It's like I can find this on the government website. Thank you. I feel like you're just waiting for paper at this point. I feel like a tenancy agreement should be no longer than two like double-sided pieces of paper.
Mm.
And I have to read it as well. It's not something I can just sign my life
No, you can't
away.
skip it. Yeah, you have to read all of it. Yeah.
And I'm like, my tenancy agreement, I spent what? Oh, I think 4 to 5 days reading it. I took
Wow.
section on section. I was like, this is too much. Do I look like some I'm like and I'm just like, oh my God. And also, if you're charging like all like rent, because like I live in like a supported accommodation
Right.
and I just pay for the accommodation.
Yeah.
There's £1,000 and £50 for the service charge. And
Hmm.
I'm like, does the landlord need a second, third, fourth job as well? Like, I can help you find a job and write your CV. Sort of. I'm like, this is a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot.
And I'm just like, this is stressful. And then I'm like, I'm glad I don't have to pay for this. Like, so can you discuss the potential impact of ADHD has on forming and maintaining relationships in adulthood?
Oh man, yeah. So obviously with ADHD, the way I see it is that you have a real lack of understanding of your sense of self. So what that may look like is not understanding not only yourself but what may be good for you or may be bad for you. And that may manifest itself in being with people who aren't necessarily what you need. With having a lack of sense of self as well, it kind of opens you up to being with people that can be sometimes quite abusive or sometimes quite mentally, physically abusive. In terms of forming relationships or being with people that you feel validate you in ways that aren't necessarily sustainable. I'd love to do like a study or like some sort of like census about people with ADHD in relationships and what that sort of looks like. Just because, you know, most people's relationships in some way are based on their depiction of what they feel like is the ideal person. So if if you grew up in a household where I don't know, was your mom always spoke about other people's appearance, for example, you may be the type of person who is always bothered about your appearance, and then that might
Mhm.
attract a certain type of person. So it's really interesting. So it can be quite difficult, and especially managing symptoms in relationships. Some people just find it very difficult to be with people that have ADHD for a variety of different reasons. Being inattentive could mean that you miss birthdays or you miss details about people in their week and in a day, and sometimes people can take that personally. Sometimes people can struggle with things like hyperactivity, for example. That can manifest itself at any point during the day. And again, sometimes people can struggle with dealing with that. So it could be very, very difficult to understand ADHD from the perspective of someone who has it and someone who's being with someone that has ADHD. People with ADHD in relationships, like I said to you before, are always constantly saying sorry. They're constantly saying sorry for doing this, constantly saying sorry for showing their symptoms, constantly saying sorry for eliciting certain behaviors that are attributed to ADHD. And because of that sort of, I believe, sort of ingrained kind of low self-esteem, it makes them vulnerable to being really worried about how their partner perceives them on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes that can lead to things like jealousy or sometimes even possession. So, or attempt to being possessive. So, it can be quite difficult to navigate being with someone with ADHD and also having ADHD and being in a relationship.
Mhm. Like, can you ex can you so how mm, what sort of strategies or interventions that can help adults manage their symptoms at work in their workplace?
Um, so as you mentioned before, which is really excellent, is access to work. It's government funded. It's worth about 6,000 per person, so you can use that. Um, some people use post-it notes on their monitors, for example, that can help them remind them of things. One thing that is really beneficial for me personally that I use in my work, my day to day, is I use the to-do list function on Microsoft Teams and on Microsoft Office and Outlook. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to schedule things and at the beginning of the week, your AI companion will sort of email you, so to speak, about things that you have come up this week that you've scheduled. And you can schedule it for certain days, and you can add them to your calendar as well. And obviously, 5 minutes before things come up on your calendar, they can usually come up and remind you. Just because I genuinely just will forget, so that's a really good resource that can help in work. And just overall, having an understanding of your symptoms and how they manifest. If you are one of those people that needs movement, then try to find a workplace that allows that. And if you can't, have a conversation with your manager about having sort of a maybe 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes even just 5 minute movement break where you just need to walk around for a bit. Most offices nowadays sort of are more accommodating of that sort of thing. So that should be fine. I said access to work. I've said sort of calendars and organizers can help as well. An ADHD buddy can be really good too, a body double. So what that may look like is someone who doesn't have ADHD, and just having someone there to work with that can really help you concentrate and keep you on track with certain things, and also just someone to bounce ideas off really, because as ADHD is, we have a multitude of ideas. So yeah, those sort of things can definitely help in the workplace.
So, what? So, can you discuss the potential impact of ADHD on financial management and decision making in
Yeah.
adulthood?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so with ADHD is, it can be difficult to manage finances because now you are independent. There isn't someone always necessarily telling you what to do. And with, for example, a high level of impulsivity, which can also lead to things like sort of addiction issues with things like shopping, for example, that can lead to quite difficult financial situations. You might see something you like and you might be worried that it won't be there the next day, so you might just buy it. And that isn't necessarily
Wait, is that
take.
ADHD?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's definitely ADHD. Absolutely. Yeah, that's impulsivity. That's literally the definition of impulsivity. And that's something that people with ADHD and autism as well can struggle with, is that sort of impulsivity. So that can be hard to manage as well because you think, oh, that might not be there. You're not necessarily thinking long term about the rest of the month, for example, about your finances or about budgeting or about what your outgoings are for that month or potential outgoings are for that month. And you're just in that situation, you're making the decision based on sort of what you think might happen. And that can be very difficult to manage. So always just sort of you're making sure, one thing I like to look at, a bit of financial advice that I got a while ago is if you can't afford to buy something twice in that moment, just don't buy it. And it's helped me sort of navigate my own sort of impulsivity and buying things I don't necessarily need. In terms of sort of, like I said before, budgeting is really important. That can help with organizational skills, and that's a good strategy to have overall sort of finances. Just having a rough calculation of what goes out of your account every single month, and knowing how much you can put away, how much you can spend, what you can save, can be really good to help you manage your finances. I'd highly recommend if anyone. Most bank apps nowadays have inbuilt budgeting software within the app. I know NatWest does, so that can help. But there's loads of different apps you can use too to help budget. So yeah, it can be very difficult to help sort of manage your finances, but there's a lot of things you can do to sort of alleviate that sort of thing.
Mm. And you can, if you're like on like certain like benefits or something like that, you can also um benefits of full-time medication. There's like a
Mm,
whole host of conditions. So you can like get free medication if you have ADHD and you have to pay for your medication.
mm.
What are some of the potential long-term effects of untreated or unmanaged ADHD in adulthood?
I think the long-term effects of untreated, unmanaged ADHD, you're seeing them in real time in sort of public discourse. There are a lot of people who, I mean, I know people at work, for example, who I know for a fact have ADHD, and their whole lives they have been told that they are stupid or lazy or they're unable to work in certain jobs, or what they're doing is very rude, or they're always late. And all these sort of things accumulate into sort of a real sort of sense of self doubt and low self esteem, as I've constantly brought up. throughout this podcast. Um, Long term, it really does link to sort of things like depression and anxiety, low self esteem, sometimes even things like trauma or PTSD, because you just do not understand why it is you're doing certain things. You know, the strategies you have, for example, to manage your ADHD are usually going to be inefficient if you don't understand that you have ADHD. Sometimes they can work, most of the time they usually don't, you know. Um, it also leads you to suffer with things like social exclusion. You know, people may not associate with you, or people may not want to be close to you because you might be the weird one that fidgets, or you might be the one that rocks back and forth during meetings, and people might find that off-putting or strange. You know, and when you don't have that sense of self, when you don't understand yourself, it's very difficult to place yourself in society, and that can be really isolating long term.
So, can we explore the potential impact of ADHD on sleep patterns and strategies for improving sleep quality in adulthood?
Definitely. So, as I said before, with ADHD, the ADHD brain, you have depleted stores of serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter sort of responsible for sort of rest or sleep in general. Sleep is literally, a really good quote about sleep is that if sleep was a drug, it would be worth trillions. You know, it is one of the most important bodily functions that we can engage with. It helps with things like memory retention, muscle gain, fat loss, regulating emotions, regulating temperature, homeostasis. All this sort of things are responsible and come through sleep. Some of the strategies you can use for sleep are some really good ones I'd recommend. If you struggle with sort of like duvets, buying a weighted duvet, again, expensive, but that can really be beneficial. Blackout curtains. I have blackout curtains. I didn't realize how good they would be until my girlfriend brought them, and now I don't think I can live without them. So I definitely recommend them for anyone that struggles with sleep. Making sure your room is the appropriate temperature, which can be quite difficult. Obviously, with financial constraints, it's really cold now, so you have to worry about heating bills. But if that's the case, then maybe getting hot water bottles sort of put in your bed before you get in bed can really be beneficial. So, right temperature sort of room, duvet, heavy duvets, blackout curtains. Trying not to eat too close to bed as well. If you're gonna have a big meal for dinner, have a little sort of 2 to 3 hour break between that last meal and you going to bed can be really beneficial as well. Um, a supplement you could try is magnesium. Is really good for getting to sleep, so that can help with anxiety relief as well and sort of getting to sleep. And overall, just things like hydration can help with getting sleep as well. So, sort of diet and exercise, making sure you get enough exercise in, all really good things that can help you get sleep and improve that sleep quality.